There's a growing body of research in urban studies broadly, and sociology perhaps more particularly, that seems to indicate that there are so-called neighborhood effects whereby certain characteristics of certain kinds of neighborhoods are conducive to certain kinds of behaviors. And for marginalized groups, and for example the poor or with high rates of unemployment, these neighborhoods sometimes have deteriorated to a point where they have a lot of broken windows or apartments that aren't kept up, yards that aren't kept up, and so on. And that's conducive to crime, perhaps drug use, alcoholism, and so on. There's pretty strong effects that have been shown of the neighborhood on behavior and health of people who live in those neighborhoods. Sometimes because they are isolated and left alone, marginalized.
As I've gone out to visit my clients in their homes or their places of work, I can't say for certain that urban design is a contributing factor to the rate of their success in recovery or not, but instinctively I would say yes, it is a factor. The reason that I think that is that I know that I work with certain clients who live within the city, who are in certain areas, and if they tell me they're working towards recovery, one of the first things I want to do is work to get them relocated.
So it's challenging to answer the question of specific areas where people are more likely to encounter meth use, or more likely to be triggered for relapse because of being in those geographical areas. Drug use traverses all demographics of society: socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, class. I do think that people know where to access it, and sometimes that can be in some stereotypical places in town, like by the homeless shelter, downtown, Pioneer Park. People know where to go to get it.
In neighborhoods where there are no opportunities and people don't have the means to get to where there are opportunities from those neighborhoods, they adapt, sometimes by engaging in criminal activity that provides them with resources that they otherwise wouldn't have, selling drugs perhaps. And that takes root in certain kinds of neighborhoods, especially these run-down neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods run down because people don't have resources. Landlords don't put money into apartments, especially if there are high rates of vacancy.
Substance abuse comes as a result of covering up or trying to equalize some of the deficits people identify within themselves. I think it's hard to disconnect the psychological aspects with the environmental or the physical environmental, but because both indicate an investment in a certain population. In the Sugar House area, or a more affluent part, resources mean that government cares about that population, or there is an interest in sort of caretaking that population. If we're looking at design of a city, ideally we're going to be looking at some equality in the way that we separate and allocate some of the funds.
I know there's a sense from many conversations with my clients that there are certain parts of town that are a lost cause. They don't worry about going down to the road home or to Pioneer Park as much to pick up drugs or to sell drugs, because they know that a lot of, even though there is a large presence of police officers there, that the police are not as likely to intervene and arrest people because there's such a quick turnaround, and because it's so pervasive there that there's really no point. But it seems that there's a willingness to turn a blind eye to certain areas of town, not even just the ones where drugs are accessed, but where drugs are more prevalent.
When people in those areas where there is funding that's allocated, people are going to see that investment, they're going to take from that example, and they're going to want to invest in themselves. So that means taking those risks and, you know, putting forth the effort, because hey, people around me, my government, the planners, they're investing in me. I need to invest in me too.
There are individuals who are working towards recovery who are not having as many setbacks, who are not relapsing as often, who are really working their programs and focusing on their goals and achieving those goals, while others struggle a little bit in even setting those goals, and if they have gotten to a point of being able to set those goals, actually being able to achieve those goals may be something that's not happening for them.
There are people who have some kind of financial stability and live in an environment that is more conducive to reminding them of the benefits of having a healthier, sober life, living in recovery. Obviously, there's a lot of attrition rates with my clients who are struggling to hold down a job, who don't have support from their family, who, when I ask them about their primary support group, have a hard time coming up with even a few names of people who they feel have been consistently there for them, who are couch surfing, sometimes are homeless.
I mean, categorizing into group A, the people who are going to have success in treatment, and group B, they're going to struggle, ultimately comes down to the degree to which people are willing to put forth the risk and the potential reward of their disclosure.
The stereotype would be that a meth addict is not very coherent or linear.
People want to believe that gay men are reckless.
Has some frenetic motions, is very thin and gaunt, often with sunken cheeks, may have rotted out teeth.
They want to believe they're irresponsible.
That's not what a lot of my clients look like. You would never look at them and think crystal meth addict.
What we know is that that's just not the case.
Many people are turning to crystal meth as a means of self-medicating, whether that be that they have come out of the closet to their family and have struggled through that and have turned to substances, or found friends in people who were using and so fell into using, or whether it be that their HIV status and that diagnosis was too much for them to handle and they've spiraled into self-medication and using of substances. What I do know is that it's a common problem in this population, that it's difficult to tackle, and that it perpetuates itself because it is so common within the population.
A lot of people believe that they're damaged goods from the start because they're gay, and then you add crystal meth use on top of that. And like I said, potentially HIV status, and people feel like they're just biding their time. And that's not very conducive to recovery in a long-term, sustained way. People in recovery who are pretty entrenched in their addictions don't feel that they deserve anything else. They don't know where to look, or that they even merit receiving the kind of support that would be available to them. The biggest struggle off the bat is people just believing that they're worth it. And there's also great ambivalence about going back to using, because I can't offer them the same kind of satisfaction, gratification that a hit of meth is going to offer them in 15 seconds, versus saying, hey, if you stick with this for months or years, the payoff will be worth it in the end, but you're going to feel like shit in the interim. And sex might be really unsatisfying for you, and you may really struggle to feel accepted, to enjoy dating relationships, or even know how to put yourself out there, especially when you add other factors on, like someone being HIV positive.
What we know from all the research about recovery success is to address things from this whole person perspective, taking into account the variables of any needs that are associated with an individual's use. They could be medical, environmental, lot of family stuff and a lot of just really where they're located. Another one of the huge indicators is the frequency to which people are exposed to some of those super high-risk behaviors, whether physically or psychologically. If the environment is really rich in some of these triggers, the likelihood of success is going to go way down.
Some of the variables that social scientists look at when we're trying to measure the degree to which neighborhoods might have a negative effect on behavior and health are things like what's sometimes called the broken windows effect. Physical manifestations of poverty, like broken windows. They simply count how many broken windows there are, or the number of lawns, say, that haven't been mowed for weeks and weeks and weeks, how much trash there is, those kinds of things. That's one way.
People will come in with common reasons why, or triggers, cravings, urges that have led them back to active use. And that's often, most often I would say, being in an environment where they're exposed to the drug.
Another thing we look at is the crime rate in the neighborhood. Another aspect of that is whether people have a fear of crime. People that are living there perhaps are afraid to venture out, especially this happens with the elderly.
Some of those variables would include primarily the individual themselves. Have they made that choice for themselves? Are they being pushed into a choice to work towards recovery? Are they motivated? That's a huge variable. It's really got to be client-driven. Recovery is all about reaching that goal for yourself. Other variables would consist of whether a person has adequate social support or family support. Where are they living? What sort of environment are they in? What sort of treatment options are available to them? How are they able to access that treatment? Do they have transportation to get to treatment facilities? Different things like that can really impact somebody's success and motivation.
I think that when funds are allocated to certain areas and not to others, the effect on recovery is, well, people care about me. People care about me because I live in a certain area, and some apathy by those people who live in a more neglected area is going to internalize, and people are going to be like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I make myself better, if I believe in myself and I sort of challenge and take those risks to have betterment of my me.
I think there's some promising things going on now whereby resources are being provided instead of building new places to concentrate marginalized people, instead giving people the resources to locate where they're able to locate within the broader population, the broader community. Jane Jacobs talked about the importance of having eyes on the street, having neighbors who were concerned about neighbors and the neighborhood. And so having people that don't feel marginalized, that have adequate housing and the means to keep it up on their own, and then having a sense of community can help protect them and help protect the health and safety of people in the neighborhood, give them a sense of confidence as well as a reason to be confident.
Safety in not only where they live and how they live and who they are, the safety to allow yourself to live and to be who you are. I think that that's the obligation of everybody who exists. And if there's the opportunity for people who are planning to be more accommodating and allocate the right resources to help people to secure that, I mean, that's the ideal circumstance.
I mean, I think about what Mayor Giuliani did in New York as far as cleaning up the city, saying it's worth it to get people off the streets, it's worth it to try and eradicate drugs from downtown, or at least the great visibility and accessibility of drugs to, not just in a Band-Aid way, but looking at the the larger systemic approach to take people out of poverty, out of chronic homelessness, out of chronic drug use by creating cleaner, safer, more accessible, well-lit, well-resourced places that can be accessed by people from populations that are written off, I think is really important.
When people feel that they're part of a neighborhood, especially a neighborhood with families and other children, people that are straight, so to speak, I think they're constrained by that and encouraged by that to want to have the same kind of lifestyle.
If I could give one piece of advice to urban planners or to policymakers in considering urban design in relation to social issues, including substance abuse, it would be that to take into consideration the disparities in our community and the effect that those disparities have, not just on the individuals who are impacted negatively by that, but those who don't seem like they are as well. So when individuals in our community are suffering with substance abuse and addiction, this impacts our whole community. And when resources are readily available to individuals in certain areas, and oftentimes those aren't even the individuals who are in most desperate need for those resources, making sure that things are available across the board and available where they're needed most. Reaching out to the populations that are most in need of resources, most in need of services, and creating a safe place for everybody to live, not just certain groups of people.
When you're walking down some of those less well-funded areas, there isn't that feeling of safety. That in working with patients or clients or individuals who are coming from those places, that's a primary concern. And for some people, I would say absolutely, it's one of the reasons why they started using drugs in the first place, just to sort of get away from some of the stress and some of the overwhelming fear that is just associated with where they live. If we can start to allocate funds in a different way to associate and integrate everybody, I mean, everybody has the opportunity to feel safe, feel like they matter, that other people also see that they matter, and then they get to invest a little bit more in themselves and see that recovery or the risks that are associated with that work is worth it.
You know, I don't have expertise in knowing what are the causes or what factors in the built environment might contribute to recidivism or success in recovering from drug addiction and a life in a subculture of drugs. But my inclination is that that's a very fertile place to look at how creating these spaces in cities where people feel safe and have the means to conduct their lives with dignity and in spaces that have a lot of public areas that are free of crime and so on. I have a feeling that that would tend to lead to lower rates of recidivism, to healthier outcomes in terms of drug use and drug abuse.